March 8, 1945, 2:32 p.m. American Tank Commander Lieutenant James O'Connor stared in disbelief at the frontal damage to his M4A3 Sherman. A single German soldier, barely 17 years old, had shouldered a tube from just 30 yards away, fired, and pierced through 8 inches of hardened steel. Like it was paper. The weapon cost 5 Reichsmarks to produce. His Sherman, $33,000. O'Connor reached for the radio and reported to his commanding officer what he had feared for. Weeks. The Germans had shattered the balance of power. A teenage soldier with a disposable tube was now more powerful than America's best tank. The commander's only reply, "We know, and we have no idea how they're doing it." Back in the fall of 1942, Allied tank commanders faced a technical problem they thought they'd solved. German armor was getting thicker, but their anti-tank weapons followed the same logic they had since World War I. Kinetic energy, bigger calibers, higher velocity. Heavier projectiles. The American M1 Bazooka weighed 13 pounds and could penetrate 2 inches of steel. The British Piat weighed 32 pounds and managed nearly 3 inches. Both weapons were the result of years of research and precise manufacturing. Both cost a fortune to produce. And both were basically ineffective against the new generation of German tanks. The Panzer IV had almost 3¼ inches of frontal armor. The Tiger reached nearly 4. These values were beyond what portable infantry weapons could penetrate. Meanwhile, in Germany, a development team at Hassag, led by Dr. Heinrich Langweiler, was working on a radically different approach. The basic idea wasn't new. The principle of the shaped charge, where a shaped explosive charge creates a high-speed jet of metal, had been known since the 1930s. But no one had managed to integrate this technology into an infantry weapon that was cheap, simple, and lethally effective. Langweiler's team didn't solve the problem with more complex technology, but with radical simplification. Instead of a reusable weapon with complex mechanics, they developed a disposable system, a steel tube, a shaped charge, a simple firing pin mechanism. The first functional Panzerfaust 30, named for its effective range of 30 meters, weighed just over 11 pounds and cost a mere 5 Reichsmarks per unit in mass production. Its penetration capability, 8 inches of hardened steel, that was double what the best Allied weapons could manage at a fraction of the cost. The technical revolution lay in the details of the shaped charge. The Panzerfaust used a conical copper liner with a precise opening angle of 42 degrees. Upon impact with the armor, the 800-gram TNT charge detonated. The explosive pressure collapsed the copper liner and formed a metal jet with a speed of 8,000 meters per second. That's 23 times the speed of sound. This jet didn't penetrate the steel through kinetic energy in the classical sense, but through a hydrodynamic process. For microseconds, the copper jet behaved like a liquid, forcing its way through the armor, creating a cloud of molten metal, high-pressure gases, and fragments on the inside. These secondary effects killed the crew or ignited ammunition. The armor itself didn't have to be completely breached. The thermal and mechanical effects inside the tank were already deadly. When the first Panzerfaust units were delivered to the Eastern Front in the fall of 1943, Soviet intelligence reports documented the weapon with a mixture of dismay and respect. A report from October 15, 1943, authored by Soviet Captain Daniel Volkov, described the loss of 6 T-34 tanks within 20 minutes during an attack on a German village. The losses weren't caused by German tanks or artillery, but by Home Guard units using Panzerfausts. Volkov wrote, "A farmer with a grey beard shot my best tank from 25 meters. He used a weapon that looked like a pipe with a can on the end. My driver was instantly dead. The radio operator burned alive. The armor had a hole the size of my fist, but the destruction inside looked like a grenade had exploded. This report landed on the desks of Soviet weapons developers with the note, "Absolute priority. Copy the technology." The American forces had their first documented encounter with the Panzerfaust during the Battle of Anzio in January 1944. Lieutenant Colonel Charles P. Henson, responsible for the tank tactics of the 1st Armored Division, authored a report on January 28, 1944, that was later classified. Henson described the loss of 11 Sherman tanks in a single engagement, all destroyed by Panzerfausts. His words are a rare testament to Allied technical humiliation. "We have no defense against this weapon. Our armor is useless. Our tactics are obsolete. A German soldier hiding in a basement can wipe out a 30-ton tank and its 5-man crew in seconds. The Germans have achieved with a weapon they throw away what we haven't managed with years of research." Henson's report concluded with a recommendation: immediate cessation of all offensive tank operations in urban areas until a countermeasure is developed. There was no countermeasure. The technical superiority of the Panzerfaust forced the Allies to a painful realization. Their entire anti-tank philosophy was outdated. The British developers of the Piat had invested years in a complex spring system that accelerated a heavy projectile. The weapon was unreliable, difficult to load, and dangerous for the shooter. The American Bazooka was more effective, but still a complicated weapon that required training and was expensive to produce. The Panzerfaust was the opposite of everything. It required no training. The operation was so simple that a soldier could learn it in 5 minutes. It was cheap. For the price of 1 bazooka, Germany could produce 50 Panzerfausts, and it was more. It was effective. No Allied armor could withstand a direct hit. The technical breakthrough of the Panzerfaust lay in the optimization of the shaped charge geometry. German engineers at Hassag conducted over 300 test series to determine the perfect cone angle of the copper liner. At 38 degrees, the penetration was too low. At 46 degrees, the metal jet dispersed too early. At 42 degrees, they achieved maximum focus of the jet. This seemingly small optimization made the difference between 140 millimeters and 200 millimeters of penetration, enough to destroy any Allied tank, but not enough to seriously threaten the heavier German Tiger or King Tiger tanks. The fine-tuning extended to every aspect of the weapon. The distance between the shaped charge and the target surface had to be exact to achieve maximum effect. The Panzerfaust solved this with a simple sheet metal shroud that, upon impact, triggered the detonation at the optimal distance of 10.5 centimeters from the armor. The further development into the Panzerfaust 60 in 1944 demonstrated the extraordinary speed of German weapons development. While Allied weapon systems took years, from conception to operational readiness, German engineers fundamentally improved the Panzerfaust in just 8 months. The Panzerfaust 60, introduced in March 1944, increased the effective range from 30 to 60 meters. Through an improved propellant charge, the projectile now reached a speed of 45 meters per second, still slow compared to kinetic projectiles, but sufficient for shaped charge technology. More importantly, the warhead was enlarged to 100 millimeters in diameter, which increased penetration to 220 millimeters. The production costs remained at a ridiculous 6 Reichsmark, which is like less than $1. An American intelligence report from June 1944, found in the National Archives, summed up the situation. "The Germans are producing this weapon faster than we can produce tanks to withstand it. We are losing the arms race, against a weapon you throw away. The desperate attempts by the Allies to copy the Panzerfaust revealed a fundamental problem. They understood the principle, but not the engineering. In the summer of 1944, General Eisenhower ordered the establishment of a specialized task force to analyze captured German weapons. Colonel William F. McCarthy, an engineer from the Army Ordnance Department, led the investigation of 15 captured Panzerfaust units. His report from August 3, 1944, is a document of technological frustration. "We have completely disassembled the weapon. We understand every component. The theory is simple, but our attempts to replicate it fail. The shaped charge requires a precision in the manufacturing of the copper liner that we cannot reproduce. Microscopic deviations in the cone angle reduce the penetration by 40%. The Germans achieve this precision in mass production. We can't even achieve it in the lab." McCarthy recommended abandoning replication efforts and instead improving the existing bazooka, an admission of technical inferiority. The Panzerfaust 100, introduced in November 1944, was the last and most advanced version of the weapon. With an effective range of 100 meters and an even larger warhead, it achieved a penetration of 200 millimeters at a near-optimal angle. The weapon also introduced a rudimentary sight that allowed for more precise aiming. A soldier with 30 minutes of training could hit a target the size of a tank at 80 meters with an 80% probability. The production numbers were astonishing. Between October 1943 and April 1945, Germany produced over 8 million Panzerfaust units. That's more than 12,000 units per day. In comparison, the United States produced 476,000 bazooka tubes in the same period. The Panzerfaust was not only technically superior, it was an industrial wonder of mass production. The influence of the Panzerfaust on modern weapons technology cannot be overstated. After the war, Soviet engineers developed the RPG series, starting with the RPG-2 in 1949. The weapon was a direct copy of the Panzerfaust principle: shaped charge, simple handling, cost-effective production. A Soviet engineer, Daniel Volkov, who later developed the AK-47, wrote in his memoirs, "We studied the Panzerfaust like a sacred manuscript. The Germans had found perfection in simplicity. Our task was only to reuse it." The RPG-7, introduced in 1961, is still the world's most widely used anti-tank weapon. Over 9 million units have been produced. Every single one is based on the shaped charge principle of the Panzerfaust. American weapons development took a similar path. The M20 Super Bazooka, introduced in 1945, was the first American attempt to perfect shaped charge technology. The project was delayed by almost a year because American engineers could not achieve the precision of the German copper liners. Only through the analysis of captured German production facilities and the recruitment of German engineers through Operation Paperclip did they make a breakthrough. A now declassified CIA report from 1946 lists 37 German weapons technicians who were brought to American weapons labs. Their main task, transferring shaped charge manufacturing technology. Without German knowledge, America would not have had an effective anti-tank weapon. The technical sophistication of the Panzerfaust is particularly evident in one detail that baffled Allied engineers for a long time: the self-ignition of the propellant charge. The Panzerfaust used a mechanical firing pin that shot forward upon firing and hit a percussion cap. This percussion cap contained a highly sensitive mixture of lead azide and lead styphnate, chemicals that explode under minimal pressure. The explosion of the percussion cap ignited the black powder propellant charge, which accelerated the projectile out of the tube. The entire mechanism was so simple that it had only 3 moving parts. American developers tried to copy this mechanism, but failed due to the chemistry of the percussion cap. The German mixture was so sensitive that it worked reliably at temperatures from 40 degrees Celsius to plus 160 degrees Celsius. American versions froze in the winter or detonated spontaneously in the summer. Only in 1947, after years of research, and with the help of captured German laboratory documents, did they succeed in replicating it. The Panzerfaust not only revolutionized anti-tank warfare, but also changed entire infantry tactics. Before the Panzerfaust, tanks were the dominant force on the battlefield. Infantry could only be protected by heavy artillery or other tanks. The Panzerfaust gave the individual infantryman the power to destroy a tank. This power shift had far-reaching consequences. Allied tank commanders had to completely rethink their tactics. Tanks could no longer advance, unprotected. Every window, every doorway, every ditch could conceal a Panzerfaust gunner. The battle for Berlin in April 1945 showcased the lethal efficiency of this defensive strategy. Soviet forces lost over 2,000 tanks within the city limits, most of them to Panzerfausts. A Soviet tank commander, General Colonel Michael Katukov, wrote, "Berlin was not a military battle. It was a slaughterhouse. My tanks were coffins." The post-war evolution of Panzerfaust technology led to an entire family of modern weapons. The German Bundeswehr introduced the Panzerfaust 44 in 1963, a direct descendant of the wartime design. In 1978, the Panzerfaust 3 followed, a state-of-the-art system with a tandem-shaped charge designed to defeat reactive armor. This weapon, produced by Dynamit Nobel, costs over $1,000 per shot and can penetrate 900 millimeters of armor. But the fundamental principle remains identical to the 5 Reichsmark Panzerfaust of 1943, the shaped charge with a conical metal liner, the hypervelocity jet of metal, the hydrodynamic penetration. German engineers perfected this technology 80 years ago, and to this day, no one has found anything better. The American AT-4, the Swedish NLAW, the Israeli B-300. All of these modern anti-tank weapons are variations on the Panzerfaust principle. The AT-4, introduced in 1985 and used by over 30 nations, is essentially an improved Panzerfaust 60 with modern optics and enhanced propellants. The shaped charge geometry is nearly identical. An American weapons technician working for Textron, the company that holds the AT-4 license, confessed in a 2003 interview, "We didn't reinvent the wheel. The Germans perfected it 60 years ago. We just modernized the materials. The basic technology is German." The technological legacy of the Panzerfaust even extends into civilian applications. The shaped charge technology, perfected for the Panzerfaust, is now used in the oil industry to blast holes in rock formations. Shaped charges for oil drilling utilize the exact same physics as the Panzerfaust. Conical metal liner, explosive charge, focus jet of metal. Companies like Schlumberger and Halliburton license patents that trace directly back to German research from the 1940s. A patent by Dr. Heinrich Langweiler, filed in 1942, wasn't lifted until 1998. For 56 years. Companies had to pay royalties for a technology developed in a bombed-out German laboratory. Recognition of the Panzerfaust as a groundbreaking weapon didn't come immediately. During the war, Allied propaganda efforts attempted to downplay the weapon's significance. Reports of tank losses were censored. Soldiers were instructed not to discuss the Panzerfaust, so as not to undermine morale. It wasn't until the 1950s, when classified reports were declassified, that an honest dialogue about the weapon's technological superiority began. A British military historian, Colonel John Weeks, wrote in his 1959 book, Infantry Weapons, "The Panzerfaust was the most successful infantry weapon of World War II. It destroyed more tanks than any other weapon. It fundamentally altered tactics, and it demonstrated that German engineering, even under extreme conditions, could produce world-class innovation." Weeks' analysis was controversial, but accurate. Operation Paperclip, the American program to recruit German scientists after the war, devoted a significant portion of its resources to weapons technology. Of the 1,600 German scientists and engineers brought to the United States, at least 200 worked on weapons projects. Many of them had worked directly on Panzerfaust development. A now declassified report from the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency from 1946 lists Dr. Heinrich Langweiler as target number 12, one of the most important targets for recruitment. Langweiler worked for the Army Ballistic Research Laboratory in Aberdeen, Maryland, from 1946 to 1962. His primary task, developing improved shaped charge technology for American weapons. Without him, America wouldn't have had an effective anti-tank defense during the Cold War. The Soviet copying of Panzerfaust technology was more direct, but no less dependent on German knowledge. In the chaos of the war's end, the Red Army seized the entire Hassag production facility in Leipzig. Over 300 German engineers and technicians were deported to the Soviet Union. A Soviet report from 1946, only declassified in 1993, describes the operation. German specialists were brought to Tula and instructed to organize the production of anti-tank weapons. They worked under guard, but with complete technical freedom. Within 18 months, they produced the first prototypes of the RPG-1. These German engineers, whose names largely remain unknown, laid the foundation for the Soviet anti-tank arsenal that was later deployed in every conflict of the Cold War. The modern Panzerfaust III, now used by the Bundeswehr and numerous NATO forces, represents the ultimate evolution of an 80-year-old concept. The weapon uses a tandem-shaped charge, a small pre-charge that triggers reactive armor, followed by the main charge that penetrates the actual armor. This sophistication overcomes modern anti-tank systems, but the core principle remains unchanged. The main charge uses a conical copper liner with an opening angle of 42 degrees, exactly the same angle that German engineers identified as optimal in 1943. The physics haven't changed. The German engineering was so precise that 80 years of technological advancement haven't found a better way. The irony of the Panzerfaust story lies in its simplicity. While Allied nations invested millions in complex weapon systems, Germany, with minimal resources, created a weapon that dominated the battlefield. The Panzerfaust required no high-tech materials, no precision optics, no complex mechanisms. It exploited fundamental physics combined with intelligent design. This philosophy, maximum effect through optimal design, not through expensive technology, was typical of German wartime innovations. The same mindset created the V-2 rocket, the Me-262 jet fighter, the Type Feastun U-boat. German engineers didn't always have the best resources, but they had the best understanding of the underlying physics. The Panzerfaust terrorized not only through its effectiveness, but through its proliferation. Towards the end of the war, almost every German soldier, every Home Guard unit fighter, every Hitler Youth member was armed with a Panzerfaust. The weapon required no training. A 15-year-old kid, after 5 minutes of instruction, could destroy a 50-ton tank. This democratization of anti-tank warfare fundamentally changed the way the war was fought. An American infantryman, Sergeant Michael Torres, described his experience in Germany in 1945 in an interview in 1995. "We were more afraid of kids with Panzerfausts than of German soldiers with rifles. The soldiers fought by rules. The kids would shoot your tank from a window and run away. There was no defense against it." Torres lost 3 comrades in his tank due to Panzerfaust hits in the weeks before the war ended. These technologies aren't just history. They're in your modern military, your peace missions, your defense systems, from the AT-4 to the RPG to the Panzerfaust 3, from oil drilling to explosive shaping. German engineers of World War II laid the foundation for modern anti-tank warfare. If you appreciate these technical truths, support with YouTube's Super Thanks. Every Super Thanks enables me to dig deeper into archives, to digitize rare technical drawings, to interview last eyewitness engineers. Help me preserve this technical history before it's forgotten. The story of the Panzerfaust is ultimately the story of how a single brilliant idea changed warfare forever. Before 1943, tanks were almost invulnerable to infantry. After 1943, every tank was a potential victim. This power shift had consequences that reached far beyond World War II. In the Korean War, North Korean troops destroyed American M26 Pershing tanks, with Soviet RPG-2s, direct copies of the Panzerfaust. In the Vietnam War, American forces lost hundreds of tanks to Viet Cong fighters with RPG-7s. In Iraq in 2003, Iraqi insurgents destroyed American Abrams tanks with RPG-29s. Again, an evolution of the Panzerfaust principle. Every modern conflict where tanks are deployed sees the descendants of the Panzerfaust in action. The technical documentation of the Panzerfaust, available in archives worldwide today, reveals the extraordinary level of German engineering. Technical drawings from 1943, preserved in the German Federal Archives, show tolerances in the range of hundredths of a millimeter for components that were mass-produced. The quality control was so precise that less than 1% of the units produced were defective. By comparison, American Bazooka production had a failure rate of 8%. German manufacturing achieved higher precision at a fraction of the cost and the time. This paradox baffled Allied engineers for decades. How could a nation at war, whose cities were being bombed, whose resources were depleted, produce more precise weapons than nations with intact infrastructure? The answer lay in the German engineering culture. German technicians and engineers had a tradition of precision that stretched back centuries, from watchmakers to opticians to gunsmiths. German craftsmanship was known worldwide for its highest quality. This culture flowed into wartime production, even under bombardment, even with forced laborers, even with material shortages. The standards were not lowered. A report by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey of 1945 analyzed German production facilities and came to an astonishing conclusion. German factories produced better quality weapons under bombardment than American factories in peacetime. This isn't due to better machines. German machines were often older and more primitive. It's due to better engineering and stricter quality control. Recently released documents from British archives show that British military leadership was already planning in 1944 to adopt German weapon designs after the war. A memo from Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, dated August 12, 1944, to the War Office in London, is remarkably direct. Our weapons are inferior to the German ones in almost every category. After the victory, we must adopt their designs. not out of admiration, but out of necessity. Our soldiers deserve the best weapons, and currently, those are German weapons. This honesty was rare in the Allied leadership, but Montgomery understood military realities. His recommendation was implemented. After 1945, British anti-tank weapons were based on German principles. The connection between the Panzerfaust and modern technology isn't just historical, it's also legally documented. Patent records in German, American and Soviet archives show a complex web of licenses, copies, and appropriations. A German patent from 1941, filed by Dr. Hubert Schardin for shape-charge technology, was seized by the Allies after the war and declared invalid. But the knowledge was taken. American patents from the late 1940s for shaped charges show nearly identical designs. Only the names of the inventors were changed. This technical appropriation was legal under the laws of war, but it documents how dependent modern weapons technology is on German research. The Panzerfaust demonstrated a principle that is taught in every military academy today: asymmetric warfare. A cheap, simple weapon can defeat an expensive, complex weapon if it has the right design. This principle was born in World War II and continues to shape military thinking today. From improvised explosive devices in Iraq to drone strikes in Ukraine, modern asymmetric warfare follows the logic of the Panzerfaust: maximum impact with minimum resources. German engineers didn't just invent a weapon, they invented a military philosophy. The personal stories of Allied soldiers who faced the Panzerfaust are filled with respect for the weapon and frustration at their own inferiority. Lieutenant Robert Dunham, a tank commander in the 3rd Armored Division, survived 3 Panzerfaust hits on 3 different tanks. In an interview in 1987, he said, "I hated that weapon, but I admired it too. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Every time I got a new tank, I knew there was some German kid somewhere waiting for me with a pipe, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing, I could do about it. That's a terrible way to fight." Dunham lost 14 crew members to Panzerfaust hits during the war. The technological superiority of the Panzerfaust was so apparent that even during the war, attempts were made to steal or outright buy them. A recently declassified OSS report from 1944 details an attempt by American agents to smuggle intact Panzerfaust units out of Sweden, where they were available through clandestine German sales. The operation ultimately failed, but it showcases the desperation of Allied militaries to get their hands on this German technology. After the war, thousands of Panzerfaust units were collected by Allied troops and shipped back to research labs. These captured weapons were studied, dissected, and rigorously tested, a silent tribute to their ingenious design and devastating effectiveness. What piece of German technology has surprised you the most? I'm curious. Many engineers in the comments have already shared incredible connections. Stories of grandfathers who worked on shaped charges, discovering technical drawings in company archives, or tracing modern patents back to their German roots. Share your technical discoveries. Each comment is a piece of the larger puzzle of engineering history. The Panzerfaust stands as a powerful symbol of German ingenuity under extreme duress. In a time when Germany was militarily retreating, resources were dwindling and cities lay in ruins, German engineers somehow produced the most effective infantry anti-tank weapon in the world. A weapon so brilliantly conceived that even 80 years later, it remains a cornerstone of modern systems. The AT-4 in the American arsenal, the RPG-7 used in conflicts across the globe, the Panzerfaust 3 used by the German army, all descendants of an idea, born in a German laboratory in 1942. Technology transcends borders, nationalities, and politics. It only adheres to one fundamental rule: what works survives. The Panzerfaust worked, and it survives, in every anti-tank weapon that has been built since.